A king's fate once rested on a coded prayer or a merchant's whispered rumor. In the shadows of the Middle Ages, the most powerful spy networks were not run by knights or assassins, but by pious monks and ambitious traders. This video will reveal how these unlikely agents built intricate intelligence systems that changed the course of history. You will discover the secret codes hidden in sacred manuscripts and the covert messages passed in bustling marketplaces. How did a monk's vow of honesty coexist with a life of deception? What hidden price did a merchant pay for the secrets they sold? By the end, you will understand how information became the ultimate weapon long before the digital age. What does it truly mean to trust the person holding your secrets? Dawn breaks over a stone monastery, its silence broken only by the scratch of a quill. A scribe bends over his parchment, meticulously copying a sacred text. To any observer, this is an act of pure devotion. Yet hidden within those ornate letters and illuminated borders could be a coded report on a noble's loyalty or a king's troop movements. This was the dual life of the medieval monk. Across the continent, a merchant unpacks his wares in a bustling city square, his ledger filled with lists of silk and spice. But tucked between those pages are notes on harbor defenses and the whispered gossip of a rival court. Monks and merchants became the era's most effective spies precisely because they were the last people anyone would suspect. They moved through a fractured world with unparalleled freedom. A monk's religious duties granted him safe passage between abbeys, even across warring territories. His vow of poverty and his devotion to God made him appear above worldly politics, a trusted and neutral figure. Merchants, meanwhile, were the lifeblood of trade, their caravans and ships crossing borders as a matter of routine. Their constant travel was a perfect cover for carrying messages, and their need to understand markets made them keen observers of local conditions and power shifts. As historian Dr. Elena Vance explains, their roles provided the ultimate cover, for no one suspected a pious monk or a profit-driven trader of espionage. They were embedded in the very fabric of society, granted access to the highest and lowest circles of power, all while hidden in plain sight. Their greatest weapon was not a dagger but trust. A bishop would confide in his scribe. A queen would speak freely in front of a cloth merchant. This trusted position allowed them to listen, to learn, and to quietly reshape the world with the secrets they gathered. Deep within the serene stone halls of Cluny Abbey, a different kind of devotion was taking shape. Here, amidst the chanting and copying of sacred texts, monks developed one of the earliest and most organized spy networks in Europe. It was known as the monastic messenger system, and it leveraged a resource no king could match: the sprawling, interconnected web of monasteries that stretched across all of Christendom. A monk from France could travel to Rome, then to Germany, and on to England, finding shelter, food, and trusted brothers at every stop. This was not a random pilgrimage. It was a highly efficient intelligence route, hidden behind a veil of faith. The system operated with quiet precision. Pilgrimages provided the perfect reason for long journeys. Letter exchanges, filled with seemingly pious greetings and theological debate, could conceal reports on local politics. Even formal ecclesiastical meetings became opportunities for abbots, acting as intelligence coordinators, to share and compile information gathered by their monks. Their greatest protection was a powerful legal and cultural shield known as religious immunity. A secular guard could not easily search a monk's robes or satchel without risking his soul, making these messengers virtually untouchable as they crossed hostile borders. Their methods of concealment were as ingenious as their travel routes. They employed sophisticated cipher techniques, hiding their true messages within the glorious artwork of illuminated manuscripts. A specific pattern in a decorative border, a seemingly random cluster of dots on a painted initial, or even the precise number of stitches in a religious garment could all encode vital intelligence. Consider the case of a monk from Canterbury, tasked with carrying a vital warning about a baronial revolt directly to the Pope. He did not travel with a sealed scroll that could be intercepted. Instead, his coded message was embedded within the verses of his personal psalter, a book of prayers that appeared utterly innocent to any prying eyes. This entire system was built upon a foundation of sacred trust. The very vows that made the monks seem above suspicion also bound them to a higher cause, which sometimes aligned perfectly with the political needs of a pope or a king. For an outsider, infiltrating this web was nearly impossible, not because of complex security, but because it required a deep, unshakable faith that could not be easily faked. The trust placed in a monk's habit was the ultimate lock on their secrets, a lock that few beyond the church walls possessed the key to open. While monks moved secrets under sacred vows, merchants traded them for profit. A bustling fair in Champagne was not just a market for silk and spice. It was a grand exchange of whispers. Beneath the noise of haggling and the clink of coins, Venetian and Genoese traders shared more than goods. They passed along political rumors and military updates gathered from across the known world. Their caravans were far more than transport. They were mobile intelligence hubs, their routes weaving a web of information from the Mediterranean to the Baltic Sea. This network was not a casual side business. It was formalized and protected by the powerful merchant guilds. These organizations created trusted channels for communication, establishing systems where a piece of news about a blocked mountain pass or a sultan's new fleet could be as valuable as a chest of gold. To protect their sensitive information, merchants developed sophisticated commercial codes. A ledger entry for 100 bolts of linen might secretly denote the size of an enemy garrison. A price for pepper could indicate the date of a planned troop movement. These codes, hidden in plain sight within their business records, made their intelligence operations virtually undetectable to outsiders. The system was anchored by resident agents known as factors, strategically placed in key commercial cities like Constantinople, Alexandria, and Bruges. A factor for an Italian trading house, for instance, living in the heart of Constantinople, had unparalleled access. He could observe the Ottoman court, note shipbuilding activities, and gauge the mood of the army. This intelligence, carefully coded and sent back with a caravan master, directly informed European kings and popes, shaping their plans for crusades and diplomatic maneuvers. For these merchants, information was a high-value commodity. Their profit-driven motives naturally aligned with the strategic interests of states, creating a powerful, deniable espionage force. A merchant did not need to be a patriot. He simply needed to understand that the right secret, sold to the right patron, could secure his fortune and his family's future. This marriage of commerce and clandestine activity proved incredibly resilient, outlasting many royal dynasties. But how did these two separate worlds, the sacred and the secular, ever find a way to collaborate? What happened when the quiet flow of monastic intelligence crossed paths with the bustling trade in merchant secrets? The quiet of the Scriptorium was a perfect cover for a different kind of creation. A monk, his hand steady, would copy a gospel not just for its sacred words, but for the secret message he would embed within it. He might replace every E with a cross or every T with a small, stylized fish, creating a substitution cipher that turned a prayer into a classified report. This was the birth of monastic cryptography, a vital art for securing messages across vast religious networks. They developed ingenious techniques to protect their intelligence. Beyond simple letter swaps, they mastered the null cipher, where the true message was not in the words themselves, but in, say, the third letter of every line, spelling out a covert instruction within an utterly innocent passage of scripture. Cryptographer Dr. Liam Croft notes that medieval monks advanced the field by blending their deep liturgical knowledge with complex mathematical puzzles, effectively laying the groundwork for modern encryption. Their work was not just theoretical. During the Albigensian Crusade, Cistercian monks are believed to have used such ciphers to coordinate safely with papal forces, their coded letters appearing as routine ecclesiastical correspondence. And then there is the enduring mystery of the Voynich manuscript, a book filled with bizarre, unreadable text and strange botanical illustrations. For centuries, scholars have speculated it is a masterpiece of coded intelligence, its secrets locked away by a cipher that remains unbroken to this day. The very tools meant to preserve and praise divine truth became, in the hands of these scribes, powerful instruments for protecting the most sensitive secrets of man and state. A Venetian merchant carefully studies a shipping invoice for 100 bolts of Damascus silk. To a customs inspector, it is a routine record of trade. But to the merchant, the listed prices and quantities form a perfect grid detailing the position and strength of an Ottoman fleet. This was the power of the trade code, a secret language that turned mundane business records into intelligence gold mines. These codes were not simple shorthand, they were complex systems built to withstand prying eyes. Merchants developed a specialized jargon, a lexicon of abbreviations and symbolic notations that looked like ordinary accounting. A small dot next to a sum could indicate a specific nobleman. An abbreviation for a type of cloth might secretly refer to a type of soldier. Some codes were even based on obscure regional dialects or entirely invented languages, creating a linguistic barrier that was nearly impossible for an outsider to breach. This system of concealment was made even more robust by the widespread adoption of double-entry bookkeeping. This method, which records every transaction in two separate accounts, created a perfect structure for hiding messages. A discrepancy between the two sides, which would normally signal an error, could instead be a deliberate signal, a prearranged code to alert a partner to danger or confirm a successful mission. The most sophisticated operators, like the Medici bankers, took this a step further by employing cipher wheels. These devices, precursors to more modern encryption tools, allowed them to systematically scramble names, places, and numbers, rendering their most sensitive communications utterly unreadable without the key. The Hanseatic League, a powerful confederation of merchant guilds, mastered this art. Their agents in Baltic ports like Danzig and Riga used coded ledgers to report on local political unrest and shifting alliances. A seemingly dry entry about the price of timber or herring could signal an impending rebellion or a change in a port city's loyalties. This intelligence allowed the League's leaders to impose preemptive trade embargoes, crippling their adversaries' economies before a single ship ever set sail in anger. The flow of secrets was so vital that these commercial codes began to evolve, gradually transforming into the early diplomatic ciphers used by ambassadors and kings. The merchants' relentless pursuit of profit had forged a new weapon for the state, a linguistic innovation that made their networks indispensable to any ruler who understood that information, not just gold, was the true currency of power. But what happened when these secrets were stolen or intercepted? How did these networks protect themselves from betrayal from within? The road to Santiago de Compostela was worn smooth by the feet of countless faithful, a river of devotion flowing across the Iberian landscape. Yet for one particular monk, the scallop shell on his cloak was more than a symbol of piety. It was a license to observe and report. As he walked, he did not just see the path to the holy shrine. He noted the construction of Moorish fortifications in the distance, the mood of the local populace in the villages he passed, and the readiness of Christian garrisons. His pilgrimage was a meticulously planned espionage mission, his prayers a cover for reconnaissance. These sacred journeys provided the ultimate alibi, granting spies unparalleled access to hostile or strategically vital regions. A pilgrim could ask questions about local defenses under the guise of seeking safe passage, and his vow of poverty meant he carried no obvious wealth or weapons to arouse suspicion. The vast network of pilgrim routes, like the Via Francigena stretching from Canterbury to Rome, functioned as ready-made intelligence corridors, bustling with travelers whose true allegiances were hidden beneath their robes. Even the grand public ceremonies known as relic translations, where the bones of a saint were moved to a new, more prestigious shrine, offered perfect opportunities. The large official entourages accompanying these holy relics could easily mask the movement of a royal agent or a master spy, their presence explained away as simple religious fervor. The intelligence gathered was often smuggled out in the most innocent of containers. Encrypted reports were hidden within prayer scrolls, their true meaning concealed by the same cipher techniques developed in the monastery scriptorium. A specific pattern of illuminated letters in a psalter, or a seemingly random sequence of numbers in a hymnal, could contain a detailed map of a mountain pass or the troop count of a local emir. One famous case involved an English monk whose pilgrimage to Rome was secretly commissioned by King Edward I. While ostensibly traveling to receive a blessing, the monk gathered critical intelligence on French political alliances and military preparations. The information he smuggled back to England, likely hidden within his religious texts, directly influenced the king's strategies in the ongoing Anglo-French wars. In this world, a prayer could be a battlefield report, and a pilgrim's staff could measure the strength of a castle wall. The line between the spiritual and the secret had blurred entirely, creating an intelligence network that was both vast and virtually invisible to the powers it sought to undermine. The crowded souk in Cairo was a symphony of commerce and conspiracy. Beneath the vibrant awnings, merchants haggling over spices and silks could discreetly exchange whispers about Mamluk military deployments or the Sultan's failing health. These bustling marketplaces were the era's internet, where information traveled as swiftly as any caravan, all under the perfect cover of legitimate trade. Traders from Venice, Genoa, and the Levant converged in these spaces, their conversations a mix of price negotiations and political intelligence. The sheer volume of people and the constant din of business created an ideal environment for clandestine exchanges, where a handshake could seal a deal for information as easily as one for goods. Trusted intermediaries were the linchpins of this system. In the labyrinthine bazaars, a respected spice merchant might also be a master of coordination, using his established relationships to vet contacts and pass messages between agents who never needed to meet face to face. His shop was not just a place of business, it was a clearinghouse for secrets, its reputation for discretion as valuable as the quality of its wares. Even the market's own rhythms revealed hidden truths. A sudden, inexplicable spike in the price of iron could signal that a local lord was stockpiling weapons for an upcoming campaign. A drop in the value of a region's primary export often foreshadowed political instability or an imminent invasion, as merchants with insider knowledge rushed to sell their assets. This flow of data was formalized in distant trading posts, where informal spy rings operated with quiet efficiency. In the Great Silk Road city of Samarkand, for example, a consortium of merchants did more than just trade goods. they relayed critical updates on Mongol troop movements to their European allies. Their method was ingenious, embedding the intelligence within the complex clauses of coded trade agreements. A stipulation about delivery dates for Chinese porcelain might secretly confirm the location of a Mongol general, while a penalty clause for late payment could warn of an approaching army. In this world, every transaction held a potential double meaning, and the most valuable commodity was never for sale on the open market. It was the trust that turned a marketplace into a fortress of secrets. The scratch of a quill was the only sound in the hushed Benedictine Scriptorium. Here, in rooms dedicated to preserving divine knowledge, monks perfected the art of hiding worldly secrets in plain sight. While their task appeared to be the simple copying of sacred texts, their true mission often involved weaving intelligence into the very fabric of their manuscripts. An ornate initial letter, painstakingly illuminated with gold leaf, could conceal a tiny, coded map within its swirling patterns. The wide margins of a page, meant for commentary, might host lines of micro-writing, detailing troop movements in a script so minute it was easily overlooked by anyone not looking for it. They even developed early forms of invisible ink, using simple substances like lemon juice or milk. A message written between the lines of a psalm would remain completely blank until held over the heat of a candle, revealing its clandestine contents. Professor Annabelle observes that the scriptorium's output was a veil for espionage, blending sacred duty with state service. This was not a betrayal of their faith, but rather a repurposing of their skills for a higher, often political, cause. During the intense power struggles of the investiture controversy, papal decrees disseminated from Rome often contained encrypted editions. These hidden postscripts, embedded within the formal text, instructed loyal bishops on how to counter the influence of a hostile emperor, all under the unimpeachable cover of church doctrine. In a more dramatic example, monks in Normandy facing the constant threat of Viking raids would subtly modify their chronicles. A seemingly mundane entry about a poor harvest might, through a prearranged code, alert a neighboring monastery to the sighting of longboats, giving them precious days to prepare their defenses. The very tools of their devotion, the quill and the inkpot, became instruments of a silent war, proving that the most dangerous secrets were not those locked away, but those placed openly in a book for all to see, yet for only a few to truly understand. In a smoke-filled chamber in Lubeck, the masters of the Hanseatic League debated tariffs and timber prices. Yet woven into their dry commercial talk were coded exchanges about Danish fortifications and the loyalty of a Polish duke. This was the merchant guild's true power, the formalization of espionage into a structured, dependable enterprise. These guilds transformed their vast commercial infrastructure into the backbone of a professional intelligence network. Their warehouses doubled as secure drop points for sensitive messages. Their ships, laden with legitimate cargo, carried covert agents and encrypted reports. Even their counting houses, the heart of their financial power, became centers for decoding intelligence and analyzing political risk. To manage this delicate operation, many guilds elected a specific official known as an intelligence steward. This trusted member was not just a merchant, he was a spy master responsible for vetting agents, managing couriers, and ensuring the security of all clandestine communications. The guild seal, that symbol of commercial authority pressed into wax on trade agreements, became a tool of espionage. A message authenticated with the seal of the Venetian Guild of Merchants, for instance, was guaranteed to reach the Doge's inner circle, its contents carrying the weight of a state secret. This system was so vital that it was often written into law. with formal guild treaties secretly including clauses for mutual intelligence sharing and joint spy operations against common rivals. The Venetian Guild of Merchants perfected this model, maintaining a dedicated core of agents strategically placed in Ottoman ports. These men, operating under deep commercial cover, meticulously reported on shipbuilding activities, fleet sizes, and naval readiness. The intelligence they sent back to Venice, often hidden in bills of lading for spices or silk, directly shaped the Republic's maritime strategy, allowing it to protect its lucrative trade monopolies and outmaneuver its powerful eastern rival. The Guild Hall had become a war room, and the balance of power in Europe was increasingly tipped by the secrets traded alongside the spices. A monk's vow of honesty created a silent battlefield within his own soul. He was sworn to a life of truth, yet his sacred duty might demand a lie. This profound conflict was resolved through a powerful spiritual calculus. For these devout men, espionage was not a sin but a sacred act, a necessary deception in service of a far greater truth, the protection of the Church and the defense of Christendom itself. Their faith became the ultimate justification, transforming a spy into a holy warrior whose weapons were secrets. This spiritual shield allowed them to listen, to deceive, and to report without the burden of guilt, for they believed their work was ordained by God. This conviction opened extraordinary avenues for intelligence gathering. The sanctity of the confessional, a pillar of their faith, became a source of critical information. A nobleman seeking absolution for his sins might unknowingly reveal a plot against the crown to the very monk who would report it. The seal of confession forbade the priest from revealing the source, but it did not prevent him from acting on the knowledge to protect the Church, a subtle but crucial distinction that turned a sacrament into an intelligence tool. This holy espionage received its highest endorsement from the papacy, especially during the fervor of the Crusades. Popes explicitly authorized monastic orders to gather intelligence on Muslim forces, framing such acts as a divine mission to reclaim the Holy Land. The Cistercian order, under the influential Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, stands as a powerful example. Bernard fervently preached the Second Crusade and openly sanctioned his monks to engage in espionage against those deemed heretics or enemies of the Church. For the Cistercians, compiling dossiers on Cathar communities was not a betrayal of their vows but a direct service to God, a mission to preserve orthodoxy and ensure political stability for a Christian Europe. Their methods of moving this intelligence were as ingenious as their justifications. They transformed objects of devotion into tools of their covert trade. Hollowed-out reliquaries meant to hold the bones of saints could carry coded scrolls across hundreds of miles. A communion wafer, carefully sealed, might conceal a tiny slip of vellum with a secret message pressed into its surface. In one documented case, a monk traveling through hostile territory carried a warning of an impending attack not on a scroll, but written in a dilute ink on the back of a painted devotional icon. The message was completely invisible until the icon was gently warmed by a candle's flame, revealing the urgent words behind the image of a serene saint. For these men, faith was not a conflict. It was the very engine of their secrecy, a force that turned their sacred world into a landscape of clandestine operation. A Florentine banker carefully weighed a stack of gold florins, but he was not purchasing silk or spice. He was funding a spy mission against a rival city-state. For the merchant class, espionage was not a matter of patriotism, but a calculated investment. The economic incentives for spying were immense, as a single piece of timely intelligence about new markets, shifting tariffs, or a political coup could yield profits far greater than any single shipment of goods. They spied to secure exclusive trade routes, to monopolize vital commodities like grain or alum, and to gain the priceless favor of rulers who could grant tax exemptions and trading monopolies in return for valuable secrets. This intelligence directly shaped their most critical investment decisions. A spy report detailing a poor harvest in Egypt would send a merchant house scrambling to buy up all available stores of grain, anticipating a price surge. News of a blocked mountain pass could reroute an entire caravan, saving a fortune in lost goods and time. Bribery was the most common tool in this silent trade. A well-placed bag of silver coins could loosen the tongue of a customs official, revealing the cargo inspections of a rival, or open the door to a prince's chamberlain, who might divulge a planned change in import duties days before it was announced. The competitive advantage gained from such early intelligence was the difference between bankruptcy and a dynasty founding fortune. Consider the Genoese merchants who, through their network of agents, learned of vast new silver mines discovered in Serbia. This information arrived in Genoa months before it became common knowledge. The merchant houses immediately dispatched agents to secure exclusive mining rights and control the flow of this new silver into Europe. This early monopoly funded their naval expansion and cemented their financial dominance for a generation, a clear demonstration of how greed and governance were inextricably intertwined. The merchant's ledger had become a blueprint for power, where the most carefully recorded entry was not for goods received, but for secrets purchased. The stark white robes of a Cistercian monk stood out against the dusty plains of the Holy Land, a symbol of purity in a landscape of conflict. These men, dedicated to prayer and manual labor, were also the masterminds of one of the most effective intelligence networks of the Crusades. Their chain of monasteries, stretching from the heart of Europe to the shores of the Levant, functioned as a perfect relay system for secrets. A message about Saracen troop movements gathered in Jerusalem could travel with astonishing speed, passed like a sacred baton from one abbey to the next, until it reached a king in Paris or a pope in Rome. This was not a haphazard operation. It was a disciplined machine built on faith and a rigid hierarchy. Crusade's historian Dr. Mark Tesson confirms that the Cistercians' disciplined structure made their espionage more efficient than many secular networks. Their greatest assets were the humble pilgrim guides, monks who knew the treacherous routes and local dialects. While leading groups of the faithful to holy sites, these guides meticulously recorded the strength of Muslim garrisons, the condition of fortifications, and the political tensions between rival emirs. Their robes granted them a form of safe passage, allowing them to observe what no knight could ever see. The information they gathered was secured with sophisticated encryption. Correspondence between abbots, filled with seemingly innocent spiritual advice or administrative details, often contained coded sections. A prayer for a bountiful harvest might secretly confirm the arrival of a Muslim reinforcement army, using a cipher based on the rule of Saint Benedict. This encrypted intelligence directly shaped the battlefields. During the grueling siege of Acre, Cistercian networks provided the Christian armies with critical updates on the condition of the city's defenders and the arrival schedules of supply ships attempting to break the blockade. This flow of information allowed the Crusaders to time their assaults and strengthen their own positions, contributing directly to the city's eventual fall. For a brief, shining moment, the quiet work of scribes and guides in remote monasteries had proven it could dictate the fate of armies and secure victories where sheer force had failed. The Medici Bank in Florence was a temple of finance, its walls adorned with frescoes and its ledgers filled with sums that could fund armies. Yet behind this opulent facade, the most valuable currency was not gold but information. The Medici did not just run a bank, they operated a pan-European intelligence network with their branch offices serving as sophisticated spy outposts. From London to Bruges and from Geneva to Naples, their resident managers were more than financiers. They were trusted observers, strategically positioned in every major political and commercial hub. These agents reported on everything from a king's extravagant spending habits to the secret alliances forming between city-states, turning each financial transaction into a potential source of strategic leverage. Their methods for moving this intelligence were woven directly into the fabric of high finance. They developed a complex system of coded financial transactions, where a seemingly routine letter of credit could contain a hidden message. A specific overpayment on a debt noted in the ledger might signal the imminent fall of a government. A deliberate delay in processing a transfer could warn an ally of impending danger. The bills of exchange that moved money across the continent became perfect carriers for encrypted reports, their commercial purpose providing an unbreachable cover. This flow of clandestine information directly shaped their lending decisions, transforming risk assessment into a form of geopolitical foresight. Cosimo de' Medici, the family patriarch, was a master of this dark art. His bank's intelligence network provided him with an unparalleled early warning system. He used detailed spy reports from his branch in Milan, for instance, to accurately predict shifts in political favor, allowing him to extend massive loans to rising factions just as they were coming to power. Conversely, when his agents in Venice uncovered a plot against the local government, Cosimo quietly recalled his investments, avoiding catastrophic losses long before the conspiracy became public knowledge. He backed winning factions with the certainty of a man who had already read the final page of the political drama, and he skillfully avoided conflicts that could drain his resources. This merger of economic power and espionage did more than just build a family fortune. It built a dynasty that fundamentally shaped the politics and culture of Renaissance Italy, proving that the most powerful throne in Europe could be a banker's chair. A monk's quill pauses over the parchment, the ink threatening to blot. He has just recorded a deliberate falsehood for the eyes of a visiting bishop, a lie crafted to protect a fellow brother on a covert mission. In this moment of sacred deceit, his soul is divided. His vow of honesty clashes directly with his duty to protect the church, creating a silent schism within him. This was the profound moral conflict at the heart of monastic espionage. The very men who dedicated their lives to truth were compelled to master deception, forcing them to constantly question whether their actions were a holy necessity or a damning betrayal. Theologians and scholars grappled with this very dilemma. Thomas Aquinas himself debated the permissibility of deception for a just cause, wrestling with the idea that a lie told to protect the innocent or defend Christendom might be a lesser sin than the evil it prevented. This was not a simple matter of right and wrong, but a complex calculus of intention and outcome. The Church's own guidance was often contradictory. Some confessional manuals explicitly addressed the act of spying, offering priests guidance on what penance to assign a monk who confessed to lying for the sake of intelligence. There are records of devout brothers tormented by their actions, seeking absolution for the secrets they kept and the falsehoods they told, their consciences burdened by the very work they believed was necessary. At times, the church hierarchy publicly condemned such subterfuge, upholding an ideal of absolute truth. Yet in the very next breath, a pope or powerful abbot might secretly sanction those same activities, authorizing espionage against a political enemy or a perceived heretic. The same act could be a sin in the quiet of the confessional and a sacred duty in the corridors of power. How does one weigh a single lie against the potential salvation of thousands? Can the violation of one vow be justified by the protection of an entire faith? This timeless conflict between morality and security echoes far beyond the stone walls of the monastery, inviting us to consider where we ourselves would draw the line. For the medieval monk, the most dangerous battlefield was not in the Holy Land, but within the quiet confines of his own conscience. A single intercepted letter could transform a wealthy merchant into a condemned traitor in an instant. The life of a merchant spy was a perilous balancing act, where the promise of unimaginable reward was constantly shadowed by the threat of a brutal end. For a Venetian agent in Constantinople, a coded ledger entry detailing Ottoman fleet movements was not just business intelligence, it was a death warrant if discovered by the wrong official. The risks were stark and personal, ranging from the seizure of one's entire fortune and lifelong assets to prolonged imprisonment in a forgotten dungeon. In the most severe cases, the penalty for espionage was public execution, a grim spectacle designed to deter others from the same path. A merchant caught between two powerful rulers could easily be branded a traitor by both, left with no protector and no escape. Yet the potential rewards were so colossal that men were willing to gamble their lives. A king might grant a full and exclusive trade monopoly on a valuable commodity like silk or alum, effectively handing a family a license to print money for generations. Other rewards included the erasure of all personal and business debts owed to the crown, a financial clean slate that could rescue a failing enterprise. The highest honor was a grant of nobility, a knighthood or even a minor title that lifted a merchant's entire bloodline from the common classes into the landed aristocracy, forever altering their social standing. To mitigate these existential dangers, the powerful merchant guilds negotiated complex protections for their members. They secured forms of diplomatic immunity, arguing that their members were essential economic actors who should be treated as neutral parties, not enemy agents. A guild could threaten a reciprocal trade embargo against a city that harmed one of their spies, using economic warfare to protect their intelligence operatives. This system, however, was not foolproof. History records the fate of a Hanseatic agent operating in the Russian Principality of Novgorod. His carefully constructed cover as a fur trader was blown, and he was seized by local authorities. Despite the Hanseatic League's power, they could not reach him in time. He was executed as a warning, his death a stark reminder that guild protection had its limits when faced with raw political fury. On the opposite end of the spectrum were the spectacular success stories. Consider the unnamed Venetian merchant who, through his contacts in the eastern Mediterranean, learned of a massive Mamluk army preparing to invade the island of Cyprus. He risked everything to get this warning to the Venetian Senate weeks before the invasion fleet set sail. His timely intelligence allowed the Republic to reinforce its defenses and rally its allies, ultimately thwarting the attack. In gratitude, the Senate did not just pay him in gold, they bestowed upon him a noble title and a landed estate, permanently elevating his family into the highest ranks of Venetian society. His story became legend, a powerful incentive for every ambitious trader who dreamed that the right secret could be the key to a throne. A carrier pigeon's wings beat against the cold mountain air, carrying a secret that could alter a siege's outcome. To outpace their enemies, medieval spy networks had to master the very element of time itself, pioneering revolutionary methods for moving information. They engineered systems of remarkable speed and reliability, transforming the landscape into a web of invisible communication lines. One of the most secure was the dedicated monk's path, a series of remote alpine monasteries that functioned as relay stations. A message from Rome could reach Paris with stunning speed, passed from one brother to the next in a sacred, silent baton race that left royal couriers far behind. For the most urgent news, nothing surpassed the homing pigeon. Italian city-states like Venice maintained extensive dovecotes, breeding and training these birds to fly unerringly between fixed points. A tiny cylinder attached to the pigeon's leg held a tightly rolled scroll, often encrypted with a merchant's commercial code or a monk's null cipher, carrying word of a betrayal or a fleet's movement days before any other method could. Maritime merchants, too, devised their own language of the waves. From a distance, their ships seemed to fly a confusing array of colored banners, but to a trained observer on a nearby cliff, these flag codes could relay complex messages about weather conditions, cargo contents, or even the presence of pirates, all without a single ship needing to slow its journey. The Byzantine Empire perfected this art of rapid communication, especially during prolonged sieges. When their great city of Constantinople was encircled, they used carrier pigeons to maintain contact with allies and coordinate relief efforts from the outside. These birds, flying over enemy lines that no human courier could penetrate, became lifelines of hope and strategy, their arrival eagerly awaited in the highest towers. In the relentless race for information, the first and most crucial victory was simply getting the message through. A papal bull, sealed with the fisherman's ring, could transform a monk from a humble scribe into a sanctioned spy. This was the ultimate fusion of spiritual authority and clandestine power, where the highest office of the Church openly weaponized its most trusted servants. The Vatican itself became a nerve center for intelligence, using its sprawling monastic networks to keep a close watch on ambitious kings and rebellious emperors. The line between a holy mission and a political operation was not just blurred, it was systematically erased. A pope might dispatch a Cistercian abbot to a foreign court under the guise of ecclesiastical diplomacy, but his true mission was to assess the monarch's loyalty and gauge the strength of his armies. The threat of excommunication was a powerful lever in this shadow war. A king who resisted papal influence might suddenly find his confessor, a trusted monk, subtly reminding him of the spiritual and political consequences of disobedience. The very soul of a ruler could be held hostage to ensure his cooperation, turning a man of God into a silent enforcer of the Pope's temporal will. This spiritual coercion extended directly into the world of espionage. A merchant with deep religious convictions, or one who feared for his family's salvation, could be pressured into providing intelligence under the looming threat of being cast out from the Church. The fear of eternal damnation was a more potent motivator than any bag of silver. This intricate dance between cross and crown was on full display during the Great Schism, when multiple men claimed to be the true pope. Rival papal courts in Avignon and Rome deployed their own networks of merchant spies, each side tracking the other's diplomatic maneuvers, financial backers, and military alliances. Faith became the justification, but politics was the ultimate prize. Even grand religious councils, like the Council of Constance, which ended the schism, were hotbeds of clandestine activity. Behind the public debates on theology and church reform, secret meetings took place in cloistered gardens and private chambers. Abbots and bishops, who are also intelligence coordinators for their respective factions, exchanged encrypted messages and negotiated alliances that would determine the future of Western Christendom. The incense-filled halls of a cathedral could conceal more political intrigue than a royal throne room, proving that in the medieval world, the path to power often ran directly through the sanctuary. King Henry VIII's break with Rome did more than just create a new church. It systematically dismantled an ancient intelligence apparatus. His dissolution of the monasteries shattered the monastic messenger system that had operated for centuries across England. With a single royal decree, the stone walls that had sheltered secrets were torn down, and the trusted monks who had carried them were cast out. This was not merely a religious upheaval, It was an intelligence catastrophe that erased a foundational pillar of espionage. The Protestant Reformation then swept across Europe, fragmenting the continent's spiritual unity, and with it, the seamless communication networks that had relied on a shared Catholic faith. A monk from a Catholic abbey could no longer travel freely through Lutheran territories, his robes now marking him as a political enemy rather than a neutral spiritual figure. The trusted channels that had once moved information from Lisbon to Vienna were severed by suspicion and doctrinal division. Reformation scholar Dr. Helen Grant observes that as religious unity fractured, so did the trusted channels monks once provided. Their sacred immunity evaporated in the face of new, nationalistic loyalties. In this new climate of distrust, kings and princes could no longer rely on the old monastic orders. They began to build their own professional intelligence services, staffed by secular agents whose primary loyalty was to the state, not the Vatican. This marked a decisive transition from holy espionage to the cold, calculated world of state-sponsored spying. The very nature of secrecy was also transformed by a technological revolution, the printing press. While it democratized knowledge, it also made traditional methods of concealment obsolete. A single, hand-copied manuscript with a coded message hidden in its margin could be a secure vessel, but a printed book produced in hundreds of identical copies offered no such security. The monk's quill was supplanted by the printer's type, and with it, an entire era of clandestine communication faded into history. The age of the pious spy was over, replaced by the professional agent of the crown. A Dutch East India Company agent in the 17th century did not merely trade spices. He managed a sophisticated intelligence operation that would look familiar to any modern spy chief. His ledgers contained complex commercial codes, his ships carried encrypted reports, and his foreign factors were trained in the art of covert observation. This merchant espionage did not fade away, it evolved, directly shaping the state intelligence agencies we know today. The relentless pursuit of profit forged a new model of spying, built on better codes, professional agent training, and unprecedented international cooperation. The very cipher systems that protected a merchant's business secrets were soon adopted by ambassadors and kings, transforming commercial jargon into the language of diplomatic intrigue. This formalization of espionage created a dangerous new role, the double agent. In the fierce trade wars over precious commodities, a merchant might be secretly paid by two rival companies, or even by a foreign government, to feed misinformation or betray his own employers. This high-stakes deception taught states a brutal lesson in the value and vulnerability of their information channels. Economic espionage gradually became official state policy. Rulers realized that a nation's wealth and security were now inseparable, and they began to systematically harness the spy networks that merchants had built. No entity exemplifies this transition more clearly than the British East India Company. What began as a trading corporation quickly established an extensive intelligence network across India, mapping territories, assessing local rulers, and reporting on rival European powers. This private spy apparatus was so effective that when the British Crown eventually took direct control of India, the company's intelligence system was seamlessly integrated into the formal structure of the British Raj. Its agents became colonial officers, its coded reports became state secrets, and its methods for manipulating local markets became tools of imperial governance. The merchant's quest for a monopoly had laid the foundation for an empire, proving that the lines between corporate espionage and national intelligence were not just blurred, they were drawn by the same hand. That quiet conflict in a monk's soul finds its echo in the server rooms of today. The fundamental challenges of espionage have not changed, only the tools we use to wage this silent war. Medieval monks protecting sacred texts with complex ciphers were the precursors to modern cybersecurity experts defending digital firewalls. Their null cipher, where the true message was hidden within an innocent letter, operates on the same principle as steganography, where sensitive data is concealed within an ordinary image file. The trusted merchant in a bustling souk, vetting contacts and passing messages, has his direct counterpart in today's encrypted messaging apps that rely on end-to-end encryption, creating a digital network of trusted intermediaries. We still build our systems on the same fragile foundation, trust, and we remain vulnerable to the same age-old threat, the betrayal of that trust from within. The medieval risk of over-relying on a single monastic order for intelligence is mirrored today in our dependence on a handful of tech giants for our digital communication and data storage. A breach in one centralized system, then as now, can lead to catastrophic failure. This raises a profound question for our time. Do the data analysts and corporate intelligence officers of today face the same moral dilemmas as the medieval monk? Is the collection of vast amounts of personal data for national security or corporate profit a necessary deception for a greater good, or a fundamental breach of ethics? The merchant guilds of old understood that information was a currency more valuable than gold, a lesson every modern corporation has taken to heart. Their network models, with resident agents in key global hubs, are the blueprints for today's competitive business intelligence units, which monitor markets and rivals with the same relentless diligence. The past teaches us that the methods for gathering and protecting secrets evolve, but the human dynamics of trust, betrayal, and the hunger for power remain constant. Our most advanced encryption may one day seem as quaint as a cipher hidden in an illuminated manuscript, but the essential war for information will forever be a defining struggle of human society. The same currents of commerce and faith that shaped European espionage also pulsed along the Silk Road, weaving a global web of secrets. Far beyond the cathedrals of Christendom, merchant spies for the Mongol Empire moved with the same calculated grace as their Venetian counterparts. These traders, often Muslims from Central Asia, were the eyes and ears of the great Khans, their caravans carrying intelligence alongside silk and jade. The sprawling Mongol Empire, the largest contiguous land empire in history, relied on this flow of information to govern its vast and diverse territories. A Muslim merchant traveling from Samarkand to Konbalik, modern-day Beijing, was more than a businessman. He was a vital sensor in an imperial network, reporting on the loyalty of local governors, the stability of trade routes, and the murmurs of rebellion in distant provinces. The Yuan dynasty in China, established by Kublai Khan, perfected this system. They granted special privileges and protections to these Muslim merchant families, officially known as the Semu, in exchange for their clandestine services. These trusted agents used their deep cultural and linguistic knowledge to operate where Mongol soldiers could not, ensuring the Silk Road remained both a commercial artery and a conduit of control. Their methods were seamlessly integrated into the rituals of trade. A seemingly routine discussion about the quality of Turkestani carpets in a caravanserai could be a coded exchange about troop movements. A ledger entry noting the arrival dates of specific spices might secretly confirm the payment of tribute from a vassal kingdom. This intelligence was not merely for conquest, but for sustaining a complex multicultural empire, proving that the merchant spy was a universal figure in the medieval world. Meanwhile, in the high Himalayas, a different kind of network thrived. Tibetan Buddhist monasteries, perched on impossible cliffs, functioned as relay stations much like their European equivalents. Monks traveling between these remote centers carried religious teachings, but they also bore political news and intelligence across the treacherous mountain passes that connected Tibet with China, India, and Central Asia. Their spiritual authority granted them a form of safe passage, and their intricate knowledge of the landscape made them indispensable messengers. The Buddhist monastic system created a trusted channel that facilitated not just faith, but also statecraft and diplomacy across vast distances. In the Islamic caliphates, the lines between merchant, diplomat, and spy were equally blurred. The Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad actively employed traders as intelligence agents, leveraging their far-flung connections that stretched from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean. A merchant based in Basra with partners in Cairo and Delhi could compile reports on everything from Byzantine naval activity to the price of pearls in the Persian Gulf, providing the caliph with a strategic overview no single army could offer. These global networks reveal a profound truth. The methods of espionage were not a European invention, but a human response to the challenges of governing vast empires and conducting long-distance trade. Whether under the cross, the crescent, or the wheel of Dharma, the need to see beyond the horizon compelled powers everywhere to turn the most trusted travelers into keepers of the world's secrets. Behind the stone walls of a convent, an abbess wrote letters filled with spiritual advice, yet hidden between her lines of scripture were coded assessments of a king's fragile alliances. Women were the unseen architects of medieval espionage, operating from within the strict confines of a patriarchal society. Their perceived domesticity and piety became the perfect camouflage for intelligence work, allowing them to observe and report from places where men were often viewed with suspicion. An abbess like Hildegard of Bingen corresponded openly with emperors and popes on matters of faith, a perfectly acceptable practice for a woman of her stature. Yet within these respected exchanges, she could subtly embed political counsel or relay sensitive information gathered from the steady stream of visitors to her monastery, her spiritual authority providing unbreachable cover for her covert influence. In bustling border towns, the wife of a merchant was another vital asset. While her husband negotiated openly, she could move through marketplaces and social gatherings, her presence considered harmless. She listened to the gossip of other wives, observed the comings and goings of soldiers, and used her own household management as a pretext for sending seemingly innocent messages to family members in other regions. These messages, detailing recipes or household accounts, could easily conceal reports on troop movements or the mood of a local garrison, all transmitted under the radar of official scrutiny. Noblewomen hosted lavish feasts and courtly events, turning their great halls into ideal venues for clandestine meetings. Under the guise of entertainment, rival agents could mingle, and secrets could be passed between courses without a single document ever changing hands. One of the most compelling examples is Elena of Aquitaine. During her long imprisonment by her husband, King Henry II, she was far from isolated. Her loyal court ladies, visiting under the pretext of providing companionship, became her couriers. They smuggled out encrypted letters and verbal commands to her sons, coordinating a rebellion from the confines of her castle prison. This network of women, trusted precisely because they were overlooked, was instrumental in sustaining her political power and shaping the future of England and France. For every monk copying a coded manuscript or merchant hiding secrets in his ledger, there was often a woman weaving the same web of intrigue from the quiet of her convent, the bustle of her kitchen, or the splendor of her court. Their stories remind us that the most effective spy is not always the one holding the dagger, but the one everyone assumes is holding only a prayer book or a sewing needle. A hollow coin felt no heavier than any other, yet it could carry a secret capable of toppling a throne. the physical craft of secrecy was as vital as any code, relying on ingenious tools that turned everyday objects into vessels of deception. To protect a message from prying eyes, medieval agents developed a sophisticated array of low-tech security measures, starting with the very wax that sealed their correspondence. A complex seal pressed into warm wax did more than authenticate the sender. It acted as a tamper-proof lock. Official seals featured intricate patterns, sometimes even embedded with unique hairs or fibers. If the wax was warmed to reseal a letter after being opened, these tiny markers would be destroyed, providing immediate proof that the message had been compromised. Material historian Dr. Ben Carter explains that these low-tech solutions were highly effective in an era without digital surveillance. A broken seal was a silent alarm, warning the recipient that the words inside could no longer be trusted. For the message itself, spies turned to the kitchen and the garden to create their own invisible inks, known as sympathetic inks. A simple mixture of onion juice or lemon juice made for a perfect covert writing fluid. When applied to parchment, it would dry completely clear, leaving the surface seemingly blank. Only when the parchment was gently warmed near a candle flame or a stove would the organic compounds in the juice caramelize, turning a rich brown and revealing the hidden text as if by magic. This allowed a spy to send a completely innocent-looking letter, perhaps a merchant's invoice or a monk's prayer, with a second, far more sensitive message written invisibly between the lines. The final layer of concealment involved the creation of hidden compartments in seemingly ordinary objects. Hollowed-out religious reliquaries designed to hold the bones of saints could instead carry tightly rolled scrolls of intelligence across hundreds of miles. A merchant's ledger might have a false bottom, concealing coded reports beneath a stack of mundane accounting records. Even trade goods themselves were modified, with messages tucked inside barrels of wine or woven into the very fabric of a bolt of silk. One of the most brilliant examples was the hollowed-out coin. A merchant or a monk could carry such a coin in a purse with others, its true nature undetectable unless one knew precisely which coin to prize apart. Inside this tiny metallic vault, a slip of vellum no larger than a fingernail could hold a name, a number, or a single world-altering instruction. This blend of chemical ingenuity and masterful craftsmanship created a hidden world of communication, proving that the most powerful secrets were often those concealed in the palm of your hand. A king's battle plan was only as strong as the secrets he could steal. The intelligence flowing through monastic and merchant networks did not merely inform history, it actively rewrote the outcomes of wars and the terms of peace. When the English army landed on French soil during the 100 Years' War, they were not met with chaos, but with a prepared defense, their strategies anticipated by French commanders who had been forewarned by quiet observers in English ports and along their line of march. This was the ultimate power of the spy, to turn the tide before the first arrow was ever loosed. In the Crusader states, the entire survival of a fragile kingdom could hinge on a single report from a Cistercian monk traveling through hostile territory. His observation of a Saracen army gathering in the Jordan Valley gave the Knights of Jerusalem the precious days they needed to reinforce their walls and call for aid, turning a potential massacre into a protracted siege they could endure. On the seas, Venetian merchant spies reporting on the movements of a Genoese war fleet allowed the Republic to position its own navy for an ambush, securing a decisive victory that protected its lucrative trade routes for a generation. The battlefield was not just a contest of steel, but a test of which side had the better ears in the right rooms. This flow of clandestine information was equally decisive at the negotiating table. Diplomacy in the Middle Ages was a delicate dance of bluffs and hidden intentions, and spy reports provided the sheet music. The Peace of Lodi, which established a fragile balance of power in 15th century Italy, was brokered not just by ambassadors but by the steady stream of intelligence from merchant bankers. The Medici, with their agents in both Milan and Venice, knew the true financial exhaustion and political pressures facing each state. They used this knowledge to craft a treaty that gave no side everything it wanted, but gave every side just enough to make peace preferable to continued, costly war. Without that insider view of each ruler's breaking point, the negotiations might have collapsed into further decades of conflict. In a different hemisphere, the Treaty of Tordesillas, which divided the New World between Spain and Portugal, was shaped directly by merchant intelligence. Reports from Portuguese captains and Spanish financiers, all with vested interests in the spice trade and new discoveries, provided each court with a clearer picture of the lands at stake than any official map could offer. This clandestine knowledge allowed both powers to negotiate from a position of surprising awareness, carving up a continent they had only just begun to explore. Perhaps the most subtle yet powerful impact of these networks was their ability to sever potential alliances before they could even form. A Hanseatic merchant operating in the court of a Danish prince might learn of secret overtures being made to the King of Poland. By swiftly relaying this intelligence back to the Hanseatic League's leadership, the merchant enabled a preemptive strike, not with armies but with economics. The League could threaten to impose a crippling trade embargo on the Danish kingdom, a move so economically devastating that the prince would be forced to abandon his new Polish friends before their pact was ever formally sealed. In this way, a war could be prevented and a regional balance of power maintained through a single whispered secret in a bustling port. The work of monks and merchants proved that the most decisive victories were sometimes won not on the field, but in the silent, shadowed spaces where information changed hands, forever altering the destinies of nations.